I've been reading and listening to my next guest for quite some time. He currently is a columnist with the Sunday Times, but my thought about him always was that he talked rather good sense. So when I picked up my copy of the Sunday Times recently, and the headline was "Neffet's numbers never added up to level 5, I was really interested in David Quinn's thoughts. David Quinn, welcome to the programme. Well, I thought it was really interesting, but you're going to tell me, rather than me tell you about your column, why did the numbers not add up to level 5?
Well, you see, like if you go back to Leo Varadkar and that interview he gave to Claire Byrne there a few weeks ago, and this was October 5th, and Neffet had said, let's go into level 5, and the government said, no, too soon. And Leo Varadkar, he goes on Claire Byrne Live and gives his interview in which he gave the reasons why it was too soon to go into level 5. And also it'd be disproportionate. So he said, you'd have 400,000 people on the pandemic unemployment benefit. You'd have to close down disability services again, mental health services again. Tens of thousands of businesses might never come back. And he said, so that's the cost of lockdown. So do we really need to do it? And he also said, the idea of the national plan was there was 5 levels, and you weren't supposed to go straight from 2 into 5. You were supposed to do it stepwise. So it's supposed to go 2, that's not working, go 3, if that's not working, go 4, and only then 5. And also Neffet was saying at the time, start of October, the hospitals were about to be overwhelmed again. And the HSE said to Leo and co, no, they're not about to be overwhelmed. So we didn't think there was a good enough reason for it. Now, 2 weeks later, they do go into level 5 because Tony Holohan comes back to the job and he says, the figures are going all wrong, so we need to go into level 5. And they were predicting that by the end of October, so this is around October 15th for making this recommendation, we went into level 5 again on the night of October 21st, 22nd, and they're predicting up, about 2,000, 2,500 cases a day by the end of October if we didn't do that. But if you actually look at the figures, around the time that we went into lockdown, then it was level 3 was beginning to have an effect. And remember as well, around the middle of October, they stopped us visiting each other's households. So they didn't allow any of that to take effect. They didn't allow any of this to be showing up in the figures. They just panicked into level 5, worried by this vision of 2 or 2,500 people a day being confirmed to have it by the end of October. But if you look at the actual trend lines, level 3 plus the ban on household visits was already beginning to reduce the rate. And that wasn't allowed to have proper effect. And the result is we went into level 5, in my view, seeing the figures now without proper justification. And then we end up with all the costs that Leo Varadkar spoke about in the interview on October 5th.
Now, David, one of the things about this is, of course, you and I aren't scientists. And the former Minister for Health, Minister Harris, famously said way back March, April or whatever, we will follow the science. And I think, certainly in my experience, in the English-speaking countries anyway, that kind of mantra has continued. But if the science, if it's not wrong or it takes the wrong action based on data, we shouldn't follow the science. And in effect, that's what Varadkar did. So what you're saying is that really they then lost their bottle from that famous Claire Byrne interview and followed the advice irrespective. Is that essentially what you're saying?
Yeah, basically. I mean, they should have, they say, what Neffet was saying was, we can't afford to wait to see what level 3 will do. We can't afford to wait to see what the ban on household visits will do. It'll be too late unless we go into level 5 now. And the government looks at these figures and it decides to believe Neffet's figures about the trend lines and not wait to see what level 3 and the ban on household visits will do, which they should have done. But you see, when they say, you and I are not scientists, so, we don't know what we're talking about, we can still look at trend lines. We can look to see, basically, when we went into lockdown on October 21st, there was nearly 1,200 cases confirmed that day. But 2 weeks later, which is sooner than level 5 could have any effect, it had already dropped by more than half. And by the way, it hasn't changed much in the meantime. We were down to maybe 500 cases a day being confirmed by the end of October, and now we're about 400. and NEFIT is giving more warnings. It's not low enough. And like, what else are they going to do? I mean, we're already in level 5. So maybe they'll find it very hard to reduce it to less than 400 cases confirmed each day, unless they bring in really draconian measures and basically lock us completely indoors. And I mean, this would be disproportionate. And you see, this is the key thing, and this is why lay people like you and me are entitled to an opinion. Because what the scientists can do is they can say to us, okay, here's the infection rate of this disease, all right? Here's how deadly it is. So that's on one side of the equation. But then on the other side of the equation, the guys like you and me, you know, are allowed to say, well, what will be the cost of lockdown, all right? What will be the cost in terms of jobs? What will be the cost in terms of missed cancer treatments, missed heart surgery? What will be the cost in terms of smashed businesses, smashed livelihoods, and also increased poverty always leads to increased deaths. Recessions always increase the mortality rate. So the likes of you and I are entitled to say, well, okay, you've told us what the risk of not going into lockdown is. Now please tell us what the risk of going into lockdown is. And then it's a question of values, okay? What is, in our view, as citizens, the correct balance to strike between the one side of the equation being the cost of not going into lockdown, and the other side of the equation being the cost of going into lockdown. So every person in the country is entitled to an opinion on this. And the fact is, scientists don't even agree about this, right? Scientists don't agree about the deadliness of the infection, certainly more deadly than flu, but exactly how deadly. Because remember at the start of this, you had some scientists saying we could have up to 120,000 dead, right? So it's, thank God, nothing like that. But it was never going to be like that. And they were talking about 5% of cases would end up in ICU. That never happened. 20% of cases would end up in hospital. That never happened. So a lot of what they were saying at the start was actually wrong because they didn't know what they were dealing with. But again, just to repeat, you and I as non-scientists, as ordinary lay people, are entitled to ask, what is the proportionate approach to this?
This is a question of opinion rather than fact. When Micheál Martin told us we were going into level 5, he also said, you know, the reason we're doing this is so we'll all have Christmas. Okay? I think he didn't sell that very well, because I think the population thought, yeah, we might have Christmas, but we'll have a terrible January. The rolling lockdown theory. I mean, within days, the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hullan, was already cancelling Christmas. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, you see, I mean, I kind of support a middle of the road kind of approach. So I don't go with those who say this isn't really, you know, this is not really a pandemic and we don't really need to do much about it. So I don't follow that approach. But I don't follow the lockdown approach. Not this time. It was understandable in the early days in April and May, because we didn't know what we were dealing with, and we didn't know how much hidden undetected spread there had been before we slammed on the brakes. But if you don't know what you're dealing with and something appears in front of your car and you're going at speed and it's night, you know, you're going to slam on the brakes. That's the safe thing to do because you don't know what you're dealing with. But we've a much better idea of what we're dealing with now and how deadly it is. And it's not as deadly as we thought it was, even though, again, it's worse than flu. So I take a kind of middle of the road approach. And the middle of the road approach at the moment is something like level 3. A modified version of level 3. And we're going to have to live with a certain level, because we can see that level 5 has not reduced it much below what level 3 and the ban on household visits was doing anyway. And this is the crucial point. And so now we have NEFIT and Tony Holohan all worrying that the number of daily cases a day is still about 400, because that's what they've announced for the last few days, is about 400 per day. So what are they telling us to do now? Again, are they telling us to go completely into our bunkers? And you can see just by going out on the street that people are very different this time to last time, because in April and May there was almost nobody on the street. Like, I went into quite a lot of the NEFIT press conferences in April and May just to ask a few semi-tough questions, I hope. There was no cars on the road. It was easy to get parking near the Baggot Street headquarters of the Department of Health. And you'd go into your local park, there was hardly anybody around. But this time there's way more traffic on the roads, and there's way more people in your local park or wherever you go walking. So people aren't scared this time. So what do you do? What would NEFIT and the government have to do to stop people doing that? Are they going to basically, bring the police in and say, you can't leave your home anymore, except literally for shopping and almost nothing else, in order to get it below 400? So it just seems to me we're actually not learning to live with COVID. We're still overly frightened by it, and we're being overly cautious in our approach, and we're getting the balance wrong, and we're causing too much damage to the rest of society.
But there is a thing in all aspects of life, like of history. And you look back at history and the great old cliche, those who ignore history live to repeat it. Now, you said, and everybody knows, that they gave us these horrific figures at the start of hospitals overcrowded, people literally almost dying in the street, all these doomsday predictions. Now, they were wrong. Why would they be right this time? Is it not a reasonable question to ask? If you were wrong in April, maybe you're wrong in October, November as well, no?
Well, you see, I mean, earlier, as I say, they were frightening us with the prospect of tens of thousands of deaths, up to 120,000. Now, that wasn't NEFIT, admittedly. It was one of the other experts. But others were predicting tens of thousands as well. They're often part of the zero COVID crew nowadays, by the way. But now they're saying that hundreds of deaths would be unacceptable too. But you see, we never take that attitude, for anything else. Now, again, this thing, according to the experts that I'd be listening to, is deadlier than the flu. It seems to be about twice as deadly, maybe 3 times as deadly as the flu. So we can't treat it like ordinary flu season, which can also kill hundreds in a year. But like when there is an ordinary flu season, or even a severe flu season like there was a couple of years ago, we don't lock down society. We don't start frightening people. We don't tell older, vulnerable people to stay in their house and not come out for the entire winter. We take a more proportionate approach. Now, if this thing is 2 or 3 times as bad as the flu, then we need to be 2 or 3 times more cautious. But we're being about 100 times more cautious. And that's the point. If this calls on us to be 2 or 3 times more cautious than we are in flu season, they're being 100 times more cautious. And they should be maybe, 10 times more cautious. But they're not being that. They're, in order to crush COVID, they're crushing society. And it's over the top. And again, as lay people, we're entitled to have that opinion, to wonder, are they getting the balance right, and to have a proper debate about that. So, for example, NEFIT again saying, we're worried because we can't reduce the number below 400 per day. So people are saying, we must listen to NEFIT and become even more draconian. No, maybe we need to turn around and say to NEFIT, have you got this right? Do we have to actually live with about 400 or 500 cases a day as the inevitable consequence of not getting completely draconian and over the top in our approach?
Final question, and it does require a yes or no, really. Do we want the real Varadkar to come back then and tell us about what should happen?
We want the Varadkar of October 5th back, who gave that interview, and not the one of mid-October, who, along with Micheál Martin, agreed to lockdown.
Thank you so much for joining me, David Quinn.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us for what we hope has informed your opinion on this crucial issue for the country and its citizens. Our plan is to continue to bring the best information and research from guests that are leaders in their respective fields. You can keep up to date with everything we do and all our activities on covidrecovery.ie. Thank you.